Our text this morning is from Isaiah chapter 4, verses 2 through 6. In that day the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land will be the pride and glory of the survivals in Israel. Those who are left in Zion, who remain in Jerusalem, will be called holy, all who are recorded among the living in Jerusalem. The Lord will wash away the filth of the women of Zion. He will cleanse the bloodstains from Jerusalem by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of fire. Then the Lord will create over all of Mount Zion and over those who assemble there a cloud of smoke by day and a glow of flaming fire by night. Over everything the glory will be a canopy. It will be a shelter and shade from the heat of the day and a refuge and hiding place from the storm and rain. You may be seated. I think this text really has its true meaning when you see it in the larger context, which I assume has been talked about up to this point. But I think it's worth noting that in chapter 2, verse 12, Isaiah talks about, he says that the Lord Almighty has a day in store for the proud and lofty, for all that is exalted, and they will be humbled. And then he went on for the rest of chapter 2 and all of chapter 3 and into chapter 4 and talks about what that day was going to be like. And in our text is the fifth reference to the phrase, in that day. In that day, here is what's going to happen. In chapter 2, verse 20, in that day people will throw away to the moles and bats their idols of silver and idols of gold, which they have made to worship. They will flee to caverns in the rocks and to the overhanging crags from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of His majesty when He rises to shake the earth. And that's really what this text is about, God shaking the earth. And there are two times prior to the text that I just read where in that day is used in reference to the women of Jerusalem and of Judah. In verse 18, in that day the Lord will snatch away their finery. And there is a list of, instead of, there will be this. Instead of fragrance, there will be a stench. Instead of fine clothing, sackcloth. In chapter 4, verse 1, in that day 7 women will take hold of one man and say, we will eat our own food and provide our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our disgrace. They were so desperate for that disgrace to be removed that they said, we'll provide for our own needs. Just let 7 of us have your name. And then it's almost surprising the way the shift takes place in the text that I read. In that day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. He talks about the return of the cloud of smoke by day and glow of flaming fire by night, thinking back to earlier days. And so there is this incredible shift that takes place in this passage. And we don't really have time to get into a lot of it, but the Wiki Jesus version is, it's going to be okay. After this extended period of judgment, and here's what's going to happen. And in that day, all these bad things are going to happen. Isaiah tells us, here's what God is really trying to do. Here's what He's really trying to accomplish. And in that day, everything is going to be okay. Well, I'm really glad that I was assigned this text because yesterday, and really every Sunday, and every day in my ministry in some capacity or another, I come face to face with people who are asking that same question. Is everything going to be okay? It's incredible the number of issues that we face. We sang yesterday a hymn, can't remember the name of it, it's slipping my mind, but there was one phrase that talked about in this world of sin where people are overborn. That's a kind of an interesting phrase. Overborn sounds like labor took too long or something, but that's not what the song had in mind. It was people who are bearing too much. And I think we see that all around us. And so I just keep encountering people who are asking the question, will it be okay? And I've asked that question myself a time or two. Will my finances last? Will I get through this financial crisis? I think this relationship is not going to last much longer. The cancer is growing. It's getting worse. Every day people are wondering about tests. You have those, but you know that tests come in all kinds of forms. And I think that we can endure about anything in life as long as we have what this text promises, and that is hope. We can get through pretty much anything as long as there is hope. When I was in college, the grandparents of a friend of mine gave him just a little simple fishing boat, and we got it all fixed up, and just had it kind of souped up, and we're planning a little fishing trip in the area around Lexington, Kentucky, where I was a student. And we read an article that said that the really big bass were biting at night when there was a full moon. And so we thought that's when we've got to be out there. And we went out and we had enough food to last for 3 days. We're out. We launch about 10 o'clock at night. And we're out there. And about the time we launch, this heavy fog comes in. And after a couple of hours, it's amazing the difference that water looks in the daytime and at night. When you can't see down there and it's black and murky. I saw a creature from the Black Lagoon. I know what's down there. And so we're fishing, and after about 2 hours, we've eaten all the food that was supposed to last 3 days, and by midnight, we were back home in our beds. And the reason we abandoned that trip was not because we hadn't caught any fish. The reason we abandoned the trip was because we had no hope of catching any fish. We just didn't think it was going to happen. True hope, sustaining hope, doesn't come easily, as you might think. I remember playing golf with my father-in-law one time and hit a ball. I had bad golf clubs, and the balls kept going off to the right. And that happened, and I remember there was a little ridge, and on the other side of that ridge there was a pond. And after I hit it and it's heading over to that pond, I said, I hope that ball didn't go in the water. And my father-in-law, who is a preacher, said, "You mean you wish that ball didn't go in the water?" And I think he was making a pretty good point there, that hope without a basis is really just wishful thinking. N.T. Wright, in his book, Restored Hope, I can't remember the name of the book, I'm actually reading it right now about hope, but he says that any language about the future is simply a set of signposts pointing into a fog. When we tell people it's going to be okay or whatever lies ahead, any language about the future is simply a set of signposts pointing into a fog. But I think that the fog is much less daunting when there are signposts. When we know that someone has traveled this way before. Someone knows what's beyond what I can see right now. And there's some indication of what it's going to be like, that someone has traveled this way before. Someone can give us direction. There is hope for me as I travel through this fog. We can endure anything as long as there's hope that it's going to be okay. And I think that's what Isaiah was trying to instill in his day. It's been a while since I shared this story here, but I remember doing it here, and I share it to anytime I'm around students or ministry people, because I think this is something you need to hear. It really was a defining moment in God's ministry for me. I was preaching in Memphis, Tennessee, had been there for several years, and one of our members, his name was Vic, in his mid-40s, was at work and just suddenly died of a massive heart attack. Just fell over dead that quickly in his office. When I heard, I went to the emergency room where they had taken him. And by this point, there were already probably 30 people there, some family members, other members from the church with whom they were very close. And we realized that this was over, and it was time for her to go home. And the really difficult thing for his wife was that now she had to go home and tell a 12-year-old girl that her daddy was never coming home again. It was time to do that. And so someone asked her, well, do you want someone to go with you? And, there were family members there. There were sister-in-law, brother-in-law, people with whom they were very close. And I was really kind of shocked when she said, I'd like Tim to go with me. And it really had nothing to do with me. Not that I was, close to them or anything like that. But what I saw on that day was, in the most hopeless moment of her life, the person that she wanted by her side was the person who held up the Bible to her every Sunday and offered some word from God about hope. You can get through this. It's going to be okay eventually. It doesn't seem that way right now, but you can get through this. And it just seems to me that much of what a theological education is about is finding the answer to that question. in being able to convey the answer to that question in your context, whether it is preaching, it is teaching a Bible class, it is counseling, whatever form of ministry that God is calling you to. People need to hear that from you. I'll speak for the person in the pew right now. What we most need to hear from you is, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And it's not just wishful thinking, but God is going to do something that will make this okay. That's what we most need to hear from you. And so I hope that you will be just unrelenting in your ministry, whether it's teaching here or it's here as a student, that you will just be unrelenting in pursuing the answer to that question. Is there hope? May you be unrelenting in that, because there is a lot at stake.